Okay. Okay, I know this place. You know this place? Yes. Good morning, ladies. Good morning, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sit down.
All right.
Good morning. I'm Lee Hamilton. I'm the president of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. I'm delighted to welcome each of you to this Directors Forum with His Excellency Hamid Karzai, the President of Afghanistan. It is a special privilege to welcome him back to the Center. He spoke here 2 years ago yesterday, and we are very, very pleased to have him return. May I also take this opportunity to recognize several people, representatives of the Afghan government who are with us. The Foreign Minister, Dr. Ragin Sponta, Defense Minister General Abdul Rahim Wardak. Is he here? I'm not sure.
No, he's not here. You would have noticed him if you were here.
Education Minister Hanif Atmar. National Security Advisor Dr. Zalmay Rasul, and Ambassador Saeed Jawad, who is very familiar to us, and we're delighted to have his wife as well. I also want to recognize the chairman of our board of directors, Ambassador Joseph Gildenhorn is here. 7 years after Operation Enduring Freedom commenced, the situation in Afghanistan, of course, is troubling. Casualties among USIF, U.S., and Afghan security forces are rising. The number of innocent civilian deaths is increasing. And in Pakistan, the Afghan Taliban and the Palestinian Taliban and Al-Qaeda have established a safe haven in the tribal areas. Insufficient resources and attention have been devoted to Afghanistan, a trend which Secretary Gates suggested during his recent trip to the region may finally be starting to change. Afghanistan faces enormous challenges, defeating the remnants of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, developing an economy that is free from dependence on the narcotics trade, ensuring that the sources of political unity overcome the forces of disintegration. So the gentleman in front of us, President Karzai, has the daunting task of confronting these challenges. He was born to a distinguished family in southern Afghanistan. During the Soviet invasion of the 1980s, he emerged as a leading figure among the Afghan resistance as both an advisor and a diplomat. From 1992 to 1994, he served the post-war Afghan government as deputy foreign minister. When the Taliban seized power, President Karzai rejected its offer to serve Afghanistan at the United Nations. He moved to Pakistan, where he was a leading figure in opposition to the Taliban regime. In October 2001, he re-entered Afghanistan to organize the Afghan people in opposition to the Taliban. He was chosen by his countrymen to lead the interim administration of Afghanistan at a conference in Bonn, Germany. In June 2002, a council of the Afghan people, the Loya Jirga, selected him to head a provisional government. In September 2004, he was elected to a 5-year term as the first democratically elected president of Afghanistan. He has been widely praised for his personal courage, diplomatic skills, and vision of a stable, prosperous, and democratic Afghanistan. Achieving that vision will demand considerable effort and political will in the months and years to come, and all of us wish him Godspeed. I ask each of you, after he makes his remarks and entertains a few questions, to remain seated until he and his delegation have exited the auditorium. President Karzai, we welcome you back to Washington and to the Wilson Center. We look forward to your remarks.
Thank you very much. This was an Afghan-made pen. That's why it pops out of my pocket every time I use an active pen. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. Lee Hamilton, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my good old friend, Ambassador Milam, who's been, during his ambassadorship, should I say, is that the right English?
Good enough.
Ambassadorship in Islamabad, was always there to receive me and to advise me and to help me and to listen to me. I'm happy that I still deserve to be invited to a center so distinguished as yours, Mr. Hamilton. Indeed, the Afghan story 7 years on is one of achievements, no doubt, one of hope for further progress, no doubt, and one of challenges and difficulties of a great nature, no doubt. What is it that we have done right in Afghanistan in the past 7 years? What is it that we failed to recognize in time in Afghanistan in the past 7 years? What is it that can cause us serious trouble if we don't pay the right attention as we move forward? The achievements, you all know about it, but nonetheless I have to talk about them because they are important, not only for Afghanistan, but also for the contribution that you, the American people, have made to those achievements. Your taxpayer money has been spent on those achievements. And billions of dollars of taxpayers' money. Not 700 billion, but quite a bit of money. Among the best of our achievements is that the American help to Afghanistan after the incidents of September 11 brought back liberation to Afghanistan. Afghanistan was an occupied country, occupied by the terrorists, by the Al-Qaeda, by their friends the Taliban, and by a neighboring power, a hidden sort of occupation. Afghanistan was miserably poor, almost no education, especially none for girls and the women of Afghanistan. Afghanistan had not even a kilometer of paved roads. All was destroyed. Afghanistan was among the worst countries, at the bottom of all, on health care and child mortality, infant mortality. Maternity care was almost zero. Hundreds of thousands of Afghans who had a little income for a small illness would go to Pakistan or Iran for treatment. There was no treatment even for a common cold available in our country, even for a common cold. I remember in my days in the central parts of Afghanistan, this is important to share with you. A day when I was moving away from the provincial capital of the Oruzgan province, where the night before someone informed me that a lot of foreign terrorist elements and the Taliban were going to attack us in a village where I was staying. So the advice from the villagers from me was to leave that place. So the villagers would not get hurt, so I would not get hurt, so we would not be able to, because we would not be able to resist a force like that. So we moved out of the village, went to another village, and in the morning, early in the morning by sunlight, moved out on foot to a far-off place that took us almost 10 hours to reach. And we were walking through a beautiful valley, extremely beautiful valley, resembling the canyons, not that deep, not that high, but something like that in beauty. We would along the journey, we kept going from this end to that end of the river, keeping the terrain and the possibility of traveling in mind. At one point, we were on top of a mountain, me and my 5 or 6 companions, and a local guide. And I saw down there on the bank of the river a woman sitting on the bank of the river, and the man kind of playing with the water, washing his hands or whatever he was doing. And I was very surprised. It's like there's no life, there are no villages around at all. You don't see any sign of villages or people around. And I asked my guide, I said, what are those people doing there? How come they are there? And he said, well, maybe they're from a village that's about 2 hours walk away from here. I said, yes, but what are they doing there? And he said, maybe that's his wife, and maybe she is ill, and maybe the husband is taking her to the hospital. I said, where? He said, in the center of the province from where we had come. Now, we had journeyed from 9 that evening for about 3 hours, and then slept for a few hours, and then we were up on our feet again for another 5 or 6 hours. So that means they had a journey for an ill woman to go another 5 or 6. For her, it could have been 11 hours of a journey in those rugged mountains. That maybe she's being taken to the hospital. Okay, we kept going. The story finished there. And after a month, when the population revolted, the town was taken from the Taliban, we were informed and we went to the place. The next morning, we were attacked, and we had a wounded. And I took the wounded in a vehicle to this hospital. I go to the hospital, there is a watchman, and inside the hospital there is nothing but a few bottles of alcohol and cotton. So this sick woman, this woman suffering from ill health, was taken a month ago to a place like that for treatment. Did she have a serious illness? Did she have a cold? Did she have a minor illness? Whatever her problem was, that was not the place for her to get treatment. Is she alive today? I don't know, because of that illness. Did she get a chance to go to a hospital away? Did she have money? I don't know. Now, today, when we began in 2001, 2002, Afghanistan could only provide 99% of its population, 9% of its population, with some form of health service. Basic, totally basic, means cotton and alcohol. Today, we have crossed 85% of Afghan population with some form of good health service. In 2002, we had 0 curative and diagnostic services, or in other way around, diagnostic and curative services. Today, that has gone up to 50%. There are hospitals now in Kabul that can perform heart surgery on children. I've been to that hospital. It is developed for us with the French help and the Aga Khan Foundation. Maternity care is widespread and all over the country. Child mortality has declined by 26 to 27%, infant mortality. So we can now save annually at least 85,000 children. This is the story of last year. I don't have this year's figures yet. Do you have, gentlemen, any one of you? The same? 85,000 children annually are saved as of last year. The economy has improved better. In 2002, the entire reserve of Afghanistan was $180 million. Today, our reserves are over $3 billion. And a greater part of that is your money, by the way. The revenue collection of the country in 2002 was $120 million. Now it's $950 million. We still can do a lot better in revenue collection. There's still a lot of area that we can't address, that we cannot go to collect revenues because of administrative inability and lack of proper systems. We did not have an army. We have an army now, nearly 80,000 that will go up to 134,000. We did not have a police, which we were late working on. We are working on that. Roads, we have over 3,500 kilometers of paved roads. The entire ring road of the country, the highways, is almost complete. Only a stretch of about 200 kilometers is left. We are connected by bridges and highways, and in some parts of the country by railroads to the neighbors. Trade is massive. With Pakistan at the time of the Taliban, our trade was $25 million at that time. Now it's over $1 billion. With Iran from 10 million or so, or 5 million, it's nearly $450 million. With China, the same. With India, the same. With Tajikistan, with Russia. With the United States, we have added to our trade and all that. So these are the achievements of which the Afghan people are proud and for which the Afghan people are grateful to the United States, primarily as the country at the forefront of all the efforts, and also to our European allies, and also to India, and also to other countries. Education is massively good. 6 million children going to school. Both boys and girls, of which nearly 35 to 40% are girls. Parts of the country, of course, are suffering again today because the Taliban and the terrorists are attacking schools and children and not allowing them to go to school. And the most important of all the achievements that we rarely talk about, I don't know why, I should do more of that, is that Afghanistan has once again, after 30 years of wars and misery and intervention and this and that, become the home for all Afghans. This country belongs to all Afghans. Nobody is excluded. Nobody can be excluded anymore. Our flag is flying all around the world. We have embassies opening up every day of us in the rest of the world and of the rest of the world in Afghanistan. Just last week I received the first permanent Swedish ambassador to Afghanistan. We had relations with Sweden, non-permanent. We have now a resident ambassador of Sweden and Afghanistan, of Norway, of the Nordic states, of almost all the European countries. And of course, the US has built a big embassy there in Kabul, big one. So those are the things that we have achieved. Could we have done better? Could we have spent the resources better? Could we have helped better? Could we have had more success in certain areas? Yes. And one of the most important areas that we could have done better is the training of the police. We could have started earlier on the training of the police. We could have paid an earlier attention. When I say we, I mean Afghanistan and its allies, meaning Afghanistan and the United States mainly. We could have done better in that. Could we have done better in the war against terrorism? Yes. We could have done much better. By concentrating in time and early on the sanctuaries that the terrorists had beyond Afghanistan, on the training bases that they had beyond Afghanistan, on the protection that they had beyond Afghanistan, on the financing and equipping that they had beyond Afghanistan, and on speaking with our neighbors earnestly, especially the United States, earnestly and in depth, on changing attitudes and on changing the means to policies. Radicalism is never the good means to any policy, to any pursuit of objectives. That could have been done, something that I will come to talk about later again. Could we have done better on poppies? I don't know. Did we make a mistake in our struggle to free the country of poppies? Yes, perhaps we did. And what was the mistake? The mistake was that we went in 2003, I believe, or 2004, or 2002 or 2003. We went to parts of the country and we paid farmers not to grow poppies. This is incentive to other farmers to grow poppies, because you are rewarding those that are growing poppies, and the ones that are growing peaches or pomegranates think, hell, why should I grow peaches? I'll be paid if I grow poppies. That was a mistake. Thinking of it today, it was a serious mistake. And did we concentrate on alternative livelihoods? Enough? No. Did we concentrate on eradication and talk about eradication more than we should have done? Yes, we talked a lot about eradication. Well, eradication doesn't give you a poppy-free country. You eradicate poppies today. I was naive about this myself. I thought if I go and eradicate a poppy field today, it will not be there next year. No, it is like any other crop. It can be grown again next year. But finally, for the past 2 years, we have been registering success in our anti-poppy drive. I call our anti-poppy minister the Minister for Poppies, and he doesn't like it. I should call him the Minister for Anti-Poppy Activity. So in our poppy drive, I mean the anti-poppy drive. We have registered success. We have this year increased the number of provinces from last year's 13 provinces to this year's 18 provinces that are almost totally poppy-free or considerably poppy-free. There's only one province of the country that produces a lot of poppies, and that province needs to receive a lot of attention. Now, what's ailing us today? What is putting our achievements in danger? Remains to be terrorism. Where is terrorism? Is it in the Afghan villages? No. Does it have sanctuaries in Afghanistan? No. Can it launch attacks in Afghanistan? Yes. Can it hurt us, both Afghans and Americans and our allies in Afghanistan? Yes. Terrorism is regional there. The sanctuaries that they have. And this is not, I must make very sure, especially for the members of the press, very, very sure, this is not an accusation. I'm trying to talk about a fact. I'm the president of a country. When I say something, it's taken badly or goodly in another country. So this is to describe a fact. Unfortunately, in the tribal territories of Pakistan and other areas there, for years, sanctuaries were tolerated, and they existed there. We see the consequences of that now for the region, for Afghanistan, and for Pakistan, unfortunately. Benazir Bhutto, her assassination. And unfortunately, in my case, I was the last person to meet with her that day. We met, and such an excellent meeting, complete meeting of minds on this question of terrorism and how to fight it, complete understanding on sanctuaries and all that. And 3 hours later, just as I'm taking off from Islamabad airport towards Kabul, she is assassinated there, next to the airport. And thousands of other sufferers in Pakistan, families whose lives were destroyed by bombs, by suicide bombings and all that. And the latest incident in Islamabad, of that bombing in the Marriott Hotel. And the hundreds of people that suffer every day. For years, since 2004, right after the presidential elections, Afghanistan was the major attack area for the Taliban and the terrorists. Our schools were burned, especially in the provinces close to the Pakistani border. Girls were prevented from going to school. Boys are prevented from going to school. Nearly 300,000 of our children in those areas cannot go to school today. Community leaders were killed, clergy were killed, teachers, doctors were killed. Just 2 weeks ago, a suicide bomber killed 2 of our best doctors for a country like Afghanistan that lacks doctors so much. A doctor is worth billions and billions of dollars. You actually can't, value it in terms of money. It's so valuable. We lost 2 doctors to suicide bombs. And for the past 2 years, we've been seeing an increasing number of attacks in Pakistan against civilians, against homes, against dignitaries, against elders, against community elders, against schools. In Swat Valley, which is an extremely beautiful place in Pakistan, and highly educated, today, as we are talking, nearly 80,000 girls can't go to school, who were going to school, who are either in high school or in intermediate school or primary schools. In other parts of Pakistan, bridges are blown up, roads are blown up, and schools are blown up, and hotels are blown up. Ski resorts are blown up by the same terrorists who were operating in Afghanistan today. They're causing mayhem and destruction in Pakistan. So the problem is really regional. It also affects our other neighbor, India. The bombings in Ahmedabad, the bombings in Bangalore, the bombings in Delhi. And beyond, Algeria, Yemen, the U.S. Embassy in Yemen. And the arrest today in Germany of 2 terrorists. We don't know the nature of that arrest yet in detail. So the nature of the problem is regional. The struggle against it must be regional. It cannot be any other thing. It has to be international as well, because it needs international backing. We tried very hard with our brothers in Pakistan for the past many years. In some areas we succeeded, in some areas we did not. Now, for the past few months, with the democratic elections in Pakistan, with the arrival of the democratic government there, led by the PPP, with President Zardari, Prime Minister Gilani, we have great hopes. I have complete understanding on the question of terrorism and on how to fight it with President Zardari. He knows the issues perfectly well. He is personally a victim, like many of us are in that part of the world, victims of terrorism. He lost his wife and many of his people. There is a great hope there, and I very much hope that us, the United States, Pakistan, and our allies in India can join hands in a joint strategy which the Pakistani leadership have now proposed to us. On my last visit for his inauguration, the Prime Minister and the President proposed a joint strategy to fight terrorism. And this is something that now we have to evolve. When we do this, and only when we have evolved a joint regional strategy, backed by the international community, will we succeed, and succeed definitely, against terrorism. Now, there are people that are suffering both ways, at the hands of terrorism and in the consequence of the fight against terrorism, in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. In Pakistan, they are killed by the terrorists, and they are also killed by bombardment or shells that are dropped on sanctuaries by terrorists, that the terrorists sold. In Afghanistan, they are killed by the terrorists in great many numbers, and sometimes also by the aerial bombings of NATO and the coalition against suspected or real terrorist targets. Now, of course, we must make sure that civilians don't suffer, because we cannot ever win the war against terrorism without the people with us. That's how we won in the first place. In 2001, we were able, together with the United States, to drive these bad guys out of our country in less than a month and a half. Was that all done by bombs and planes and soldiers? No. It was done because the people were with us. Whenever I went from district to district, before I arrived, together with American friends and coalition partners, the people would have chased the Taliban away from the district. And that is still the case. So the population and their support is very, very important. The people on the 2 sides of the Durand line in Afghanistan and Pakistan are the greatest sufferers of terrorism. They're the victims of terrorism. We have to liberate them. You have liberated Afghanistan from terrorism. You have now to liberate the people in the tribal territories of Pakistan, which is called FATA, federally administered tribal areas. We have to liberate them from the grips of terrorism. For 30 years, at least, their homes, their villages, their populations were made hostage to the sanctuaries of terrorists. The terrorists came there with money, with resources. And now the population there is suffering the consequences of the terrorist sanctuary there and of the war against them. We have to make very sure that when we act, we separate the population from the terrorists. In other words, we have to liberate the population in the FATA. We have to re-empower their leaders, bring them back to act the way they were doing for centuries. In the past 4 years, at least 300 of the tribal leaders of Pakistan in North and South Waziristan have been killed. And in Swat, and in Bajora, another area of Pakistan, where just recently they killed 5 or 6 extremely distinguished tribal leaders who are very much of the worldview that we are. So we need to liberate populations both in Afghanistan and in Pakistan from the grips of terrorism, and we have to isolate the sanctuaries, and the governments have to work together through a joint strategy to attack them. And some of us in that part of the world must now recognize, must now realize that radicalism, extremism can never be an instrument of policy, that it is like a snake, that you can't train a snake against someone else, that it can turn around and bite the trainer any time it wants, and it has happened already in a tragic way. And for the United States, it's extremely important to continue to work, to continue to re-evaluate whether we're doing the right things or we should stop and think for a while and see how best we can continue to engage the region and fight against terrorism, which means making sure that we differentiate between the sanctuaries and the population and act accordingly. Now, briefly, on Afghanistan, we still are a very poor country. For all the good things that I said earlier in the beginning, we're not a rich country. We have $3 billion in our reserve, but we are a very poor country. We have 85% of our population receiving health services, but we are still the worst among the world in the delivery of health services. We still have polio cases. We still have so many of our children dying. We still are a very, 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 very poor country. We still have food deficiencies. We could be a very good country. And what would it take to be a very good country that you all desire and that we, of course, desire so much for us? To work through the Afghan system, to build our institutions for us, and to use the money that your taxpayer is giving to us efficiently and speedily through the Afghan government, through the institutions of the Afghan government, which we call the Afghanization process, which we call Afghanization. So Afghanize things. Afghanize things means it will be less costly for you. It will be more efficient for us. And that will, in some years, give you a much better Afghanistan that you can visit as tourists, that you can enjoy the hotels of, that you can enjoy the exceptional scenery of, that you can go to the Bamyan Buddhas and see them. There's a majestic view. You have nothing like that in the world, remember. Nothing like that. That you can go to any part of the country, that you can go to the natural water pools on top of our mountains, hundreds of them. When you take a helicopter, you fly over, there are hundreds of water pools in this country over the top of the mountains. When the snows melt in the summer, there is water left there. Some flows out into the valleys, the rest is left there. It's a country of majestic beauty, of high mountains, of deep deserts, of orchards and gardens, let alone the poppy flowers, which you don't want to see. Thank you very much.
The President has indicated he will entertain questions. We'll start with you. Robin?
Mr. President, how do you specifically believe that the volatile... Mr. President, how do you believe the volatile tribal areas can be brought under some sense of order, given the fact the Pakistani military doesn't seem able or willing to do it, given the fact Pakistan does not want U.S. or NATO troops involved, and given the fact that there's no equivalent of an awakening council or local mobilization by the tribal elders to deal with the security situation?
Well, the tribes in Pakistan are exactly like the tribes in Afghanistan. The tribes in Afghanistan, too, suffered 30 years of massive imposition on them of an alien form of government, of systems imposed on them that did not belong to them. While we were fighting the Soviets tried to impose communism on our people by force, through the force of the gun. And exactly at the same time as we were fighting the Soviets, there was a massive input of radicalism, of religious radicalism on the people of Afghanistan and on the people of the tribal regions of Pakistan. Afghanistan's traditional system of an egalitarian tribal organization of democratic inclinations and practices also suffered heavily, but survived. In Pakistan, unfortunately, the helping hand was not that much. So the traditional decision-making mechanisms in the tribal structures, the traditional way of life for the resolution of disputes and decision-making have been badly damaged by the imposition on those poor people. There are also extremely poor people, on those people of radicalism, religious radicalism, and Al-Qaeda and all the other associates. They have been physically damaged and eliminated, and morally as well under very, very serious pressure. But the inner system is intact. The sense of the community, of their history, of what they had as the means of action and resolution of disputes is there. And the government of Pakistan has recognized that now, and they have spoken to us about that. We have to reenact that. We have to reinforce that. We have to bring it back. And by spending resources, by doing all that we can. One thing. Second, we have to differentiate. A lot of times I see in the West, people don't understand that those people in Pakistan and Afghanistan are victims of terrorism, just like you were in the Twin Towers in New York. But we sometimes blame the victims, rather than blaming the terrorists or those who perpetrate atrocity against all of us. So we have to distinguish. The sanctuary is the bad guy. The sanctuary is situated in a community that is disempowered. So we have to go after the sanctuary and liberate the people and differentiate between them. That's the only way forward. This means economic development. This means social work. This means counseling. This means also making the right decisions at a regional level between Afghanistan and Pakistan in particular, and on a bigger scale, including India and the United States and others, to deliver the right solutions.
The question here. Mm-hmm.
My name is Nazira Azim Karimi, correspondent for Ariana Television Network from Afghanistan. Mr. President, I have two questions, one Dari, one English, please. Mm-hmm. The first question, what do you expect from the U.S. new strategy toward Afghanistan? و سوال دوم در مورد قانونمند شدن حضور نیروهای بین‌المللی در افغانستان. قبلا شما در کابینه فیصله کردین و همچنان ملاقاتایتان در حاشیه اجلاس مجمع عمومی چطور بود به نفع افغانستان که افغانستان از این منجلق نجات بده. تشکر.
Okay. The first question in English was the same as in Persian.
Persian,
Almost the same.
Yes.
Well, do you want me to answer in Persian, and would everybody understand?
Persian, I don't know, somebody should translate.
Mr. Hamilton, is that allowed?
Yes,
Okay.
Of course.
Okay. Okay. Well, Persian is a very sweet language for those who don't know. It's extremely poetic and very, very among the most beautiful languages in the world. سوال تلفات ملکی در افغانستان یک مسئله بسیار مهم است. قسمی که قبلا در جریان صحبتم به شما عرض کردم و ما با دولت امریکا در این مورد مذاکره بسیار جدی و اساسی داشتیم. اینا دولت امریکا با ما هم نظر هستند. اینا هم نمیخوان که در افغانستان تلفات ملکی باشه. اینا هم مثل که ما رنج میبریم، دولت امریکا و کانونهایشان رنج میبرن. رئیس جمهور امریکا برام تلفن کرد، ویدیو کانفرنس کرد و بسیار جگر خون بود به اصطلاح ما و نمیخواین که مردم افغانستان صدمه ببینن. در 3-4 روزی که برادرای ما از کابینه افغانستان در واشنگتن بودن روی این مسائل صحبت کافی شده و در مورد یک فریم ورک، اساس کاری به موافقه رسیدیم.
Maybe I ought to ask for a question in English this time. Right here.
Hi, Alex Thier from the United States Institute of Peace. It's good to see you again. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your current approach to political reconciliation with some of the enemies, particularly Afghan enemies, who are still opposing the government militarily.
Very good question. I'm glad you asked it because I had it in my mind to talk about this. It's a very important element. There are those who would never reconcile, who hate us all. The Al-Qaeda and the terrorists who are ideologically of a mindset that cannot accept any other way of life but theirs and cannot coexist with us, neither with you in Washington nor with me in the villages of Afghanistan. They will not come to us. They will not seek to talk or coexist with us. So unfortunately, there we have no options but to continue to defend ourselves. On others, especially the Afghan elements of the Taliban, thousands of them are just countryside Afghan young men who, out of desperation or fear or our own misbehavior from time to time. When I say our own, I mean the Afghan government and the coalition partners, have been frightened to run away and fall victim and prey to the extremists who use them against their own country. Afghanistan would love very much to continue to talk and to increase this approach to those who are ours and who are not ideologically against us to come and participate in the life of the country and rebuild. And I call upon the Taliban from this podium, the Afghan ones, the ones who are not part of Al-Qaeda, that they are welcome to come back to Afghanistan, that they're the sons of that country and that they must participate. They're not also against the West. They have nothing like that. They're not ideological. They will live perfectly in peace with you and work with you. They're just like any other Afghan. We just have to remove fears in them and make sure that they are accepted back in the country, and that's very, very important. I'm glad you raised this question so that I could talk about it, and I hope that our Taliban, Afghan Taliban, will hear this, especially the ones who have run away to Pakistan and the ones who are in Afghanistan. Did I make it clear?
A question here, second row.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up on what you had said earlier about the work that needs to be done in the tribal areas. President Bush has recently changed his approach. During the time that you were here 2 years ago when you had the dinner with President Bush and President Musharraf at that time, there was no interest in sending American forces, particularly on the ground, over the border. What would you tell the next American president about how to pursue that policy? is it going to create more resentment and more trouble for you, or do you think in the end, if the Pakistani government cannot control that area, the U.S. has to go in?
Well, it's like this. If someone in those territories in Pakistan called Faqir Muhammad, somebody called Faqir Muhammad, makes a statement saying that he will send people to kill Americans in Afghanistan and to kill Afghans in Afghanistan, what do you expect we do? Sit and wait for him to come and kill us? Or do something to defend ourselves? Now here is the delicacy of the matter. How do we do it? Do we interpret his statement as the statement of a few people, of a community, or the statement of a terrorist network? The right thing would be to differentiate a terrorist network from the community that they've taken hostage, that they are in the middle but have taken hostage, to help the community liberate themselves and to isolate these elements in their sanctuaries and to remove them.
All right, a question in the back there.
James Bays from Al Jazeera English on a similar subject, if you don't mind. Can you just clarify your position? Do you support the current American action that's been going on for some months now, cross-border raids, incursions, this secret undeclared war? Do you support that? Secondly, do you think that the idea floated earlier this week of a joint Afghan, Pakistani, US force is a sensible one, and is it one you'll raise with the President this afternoon?
I think I answered the first part of the question earlier.
Do you support it, though? Simple yes or no. Do you support?
I support the right of self-defense.
Crossing an international border?
Look, Afghanistan is an independent country. And there are 42 countries of the world with troops in Afghanistan. For a cause that is international, for a cause that's for all of us. The international community didn't come to Afghanistan because Afghanistan was in trouble alone. They didn't come when we were in trouble. And we kept asking, they didn't come. They came for a bigger cause which concerned the rest of the world, in particular the West as well. So this is a cause for all of us. This is also a cause very much for Pakistan. Look at the suffering there. You've stayed in the Marriott Hotel. Don't you miss it? Well, I do. I've had lunches and dinners there and with my friends. It's a terrible tragedy. There are people dying. So here the question of international borders and all those things, they really become irrelevant in view of the gravity of the situation that we have. There are people dying every day in Pakistan in the hands of those terrorists. Do we want to free the people of the frontier region of Pakistan, of the tribal areas of Pakistan or not? 300 tribal chiefs have been killed. No one is held accountable. As I described earlier, nearly 50 schools were burned till about last month in Pakistan. I'm not talking about Afghanistan. First, Afghanistan kept suffering. 80,000 girls are not going to school in Swat. All the sensible, secular-oriented, moderate leaders of the Pashtun population in Pakistan are under attack. Afzal Khan Lala, one of the greatest personalities of that community, is under attack. His house was twice attacked. Several of them killed. Sherpa was attacked 3-4 times by suicide bombers. They went and blew themselves up or threw grenades and bombs into a prayer congregation in a mosque. territorial violations take place every day by them. This side of the border, that side of the border. They go to India as well. They kill people there. They go to Yemen, they kill people there. They go to Algeria, they kill people there. We have to fight them, and fight them with the distinguishing characters that I described earlier. Sometimes I see, as in a simplification of issues, we hurt the communities rather than we fight the terrorists. We must separate the communities, liberate them, especially on the two sides of the Ural line, who are the greatest sufferers of this whole, unfortunate tragedy. But continue to pressurize and eliminate the terrorists. This is an idea that I heard the other day. The Minister of Defense was with me yesterday in some of my meetings, but I have not found time to go into it. On the surface, it looks like a good idea to have a joint patrol. That means there is more confidence in operations. That means it's based on trust and proper information and evaluation of intelligence. If the Pakistanis agree and if the Americans agree, the Afghan government sees value in it. But we have to study it deeper as to really what it is, and is it an Afghan proposal? I don't know of that yet. I have to ask the Minister of Defense. This came to me the other day in my appearance in the Asia Society. Yesterday I forgot to ask the Minister of Defense about it, who was with us for a while we were meeting with Vice President Cheney and Senator Clinton. So I'll have to see him today before we go to the meeting with the President and discuss this issue. We can then find Al Jazeera and share it with you.
Okay, all the way in the back there, the gentleman, yes.
My name is...
I can hear you.
Thank you. You're both in the back.
That's
yes,
me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. President, for your very passionate elocution and telling us what the situation in Afghanistan is. The debate here in the U.S. at the moment, from our perspective, and it may be a reduction to extremes, is that there are just not enough military forces, Western military forces, deployed in Afghanistan. This is really the main issue as it's been distilled in the campaign and in the current debate. Secretary Gates has expressed his ideas and the shortcomings at the moment in terms of what may be deployed or not deployed. There are two issues here. One, the U.S. doesn't seem to have enough troops, additional troops, to deploy to Afghanistan according to the recommendations of the military commanders. And there's a subdivision of this debate is that there doesn't seem to be sufficient effort played by the other participants, the other NATO participants and the others, not in terms of their presence, but in terms of the numbers and the effectiveness of their presence. Do you consider this important in the general context of reconstruction, rehabilitation, capacity building, trust, etc., the provincial reconstruction teams? How important is this variable from your perspective? Do we really need these additional 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 Western troops, whatever the mix may be? What is your perception? Thank you.
Well, when we began our journey 6 years ago, for 2 or 3 years, Afghans from all over the country were coming to me and asking for more international forces in Afghanistan to cover the whole country. And I kept asking for more international forces in Afghanistan, more as an instrument for internal security operations and for law and order operations. At that time, the international community did not respond to my requests. I hoped they had done it. They didn't. The people kept asking for more ISAF troops. Now, in response to increased violence, increased insecurity in Afghanistan, even our highways are not secure nowadays. People can't travel easily on those highways because of the neglect of the past many years in the proper evaluation of problems and what's needed. An increase in international force in Afghanistan with a proper deployment strategy is good. with a proper deployment strategy. They have to be deployed where we have troubles. For example, there's a province that's called Helmand in Afghanistan. It has a border point, crossing point called Baramcha. Baramcha is where the terrorists use frequently and every day to come and attack us in Afghanistan. Baramcha is used by drug dealers every day to transport drugs across the border this way or that way. This border point has to be closed. This has to be watched. And bad guys prevent it, and good guys facilitate it. Afghanistan doesn't have the force yet to do that. An international deployment there would work. An international deployment in Afghan villages and cities, we don't need it. We are capable enough now to defend our own country. And we should. It's our country. Why should an American young man be wasting his time and energy and effort and life defending, say, Kandahar or Kabul for us or Herat for us? In the war against terror, where the terrorist activity is, where they emanate, yes, we need these forces. But the long-term solution to all of this is nothing but the build-up of Afghan institutions, the army and the police and the proper equipment in numbers and resources, and settling them down into an institutional framework. That is a noble effort for which the United States is contributing a lot to Afghanistan, for which we are grateful, and we like the new increase in numbers for the Afghan army as well.
I told the President that we'd conclude at 11 o'clock. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to reach all the hands. We'll take one more question. I'll go to the gentleman that was standing.
From the Voice of America.
Would you use the microphone, please?
Sorry. You had blamed ISI and the Pakistani intelligence service for interference in Afghanistan several times. And Benazir Bhutto herself had called ISI a government within government. But now you are attaching great hopes to Asif Ali Zardari. So what makes you believe that Asif Ali Zardari will be able to rein in ISI and stop Pakistani intelligence agencies' interference in Afghanistan?
Well, President Zardari has, as I said, is himself a victim of terrorism. He has the same world view as we have, the same view of progress and prosperity for Pakistan and Afghanistan as we have. He understands the problems exactly as we see them. And he's a straightforward man, a man who delivers on his words, and he's talked to us in great sincerity, both him and Prime Minister Gilani. And he's the president, democratically elected president of Pakistan. And Gilani is democratically elected Prime Minister of Pakistan. There is a democratic dispensation in Pakistan with a parliament elected by the people, with a president elected by the right institutions as the Constitution of Pakistan asked for. That's the right environment. And in this environment, we back the government and its efforts. The rest is for the government in Pakistan to handle. This lady has been raising
you want to, all right.
hand.
Thank you. Radicalism. Don't you think it should be another way that military steps? It is to provide decent life, minimum of decent life for the people. Do you have any plans, development plan for the country for a certain years and the educational program?
Yes.
Just, to provide minimum of decent life,
Yes.
which I think it is a very good steps to fight radicalism.
Quite fine, ma'am. Yes, we have the Afghan National Development Strategy that we worked on for so many years, that we presented to the Donors Conference in Paris, that was accepted with generosity by the international community, in which, again, the United States was the biggest contributor to Afghanistan, almost $10 billion they announced there for Afghanistan's development. The Afghan National Development Strategy envisions development and progress for Afghanistan for the coming years in all aspects of life. That's the education, that's health, that's agriculture, that's energy, that's power supply, that's the army, that's the military, that's the economy, that's rule of law, that's good governance, that's fight against corruption in an effective way, that's reducing corruption in the country. That's all that it takes to have a good government and an accountable government and a society that can produce of its own and eat of its own and stand on its own is the desire that we have. Thank you.
I ask you to remain in your seats while the President and his delegation leave. Let's express our appreciation to the President.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very nice. Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye. Ambassador Madam?
Yeah.
Bye-bye. I hope you visit us in Afghanistan.
You can count on it.
Please do. All right. Great. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you. Bye-bye.